So you want to find your art style. So some people feel that they need to have a certain style that they're known for. Now I understand if you're like an illustrator and you do books for whatever, and you have a certain style and you want people to recognize you and say, oh yeah, okay, I want that style in my book, and that's why they're seeking you out. For other artists, I don't know if it's necessary, but for some reason, a lot of people still want that. I hear that there's a pill for that, in case you're wondering. But even if you want to do that, I'm going to try and help you. I'll show you 2 different ways, things that I've done to develop an art style, even though I have so many, but I'll explain all this later. We'll get right into this. Now take some notes, that way you don't have to keep... Never mind, don't take notes, keep rewinding the video. I'll get lots of watch time that way. First, you have to find the art that you enjoy. When you look at art, what excites you? And I don't mean, don't go to one artist and just look at their stuff. You want to go across a bunch of stuff and say, okay, because sometimes you can get in a rut. Like, okay, I like this artist this week, and you binge their stuff. And then next week you go over here and you're like, oh, no, I really like this artist, the way they do. Just get all the artists that you like, all the kinds of art that you like, and just look at them. Just take a picture of them and say, okay, what is it here that I like about it? That's the second step. So in step 2, you're going to figure out, okay, what is it do I like about this art? Now, I'll tell you a personal experience of mine. When I started doing the pen doodle art stuff, I just started really enjoying it. I look around and say, oh yeah, I love the way that looks. I love the way that looks. What is it? What is it about the art? And then I noticed some things like, oh, I really like the contrast. So I started to practice and copy. That's step 3, recreating some of the art that you're seeing and just picking out the things that you really enjoy about it. So what I did was not recreating, but in my own art, I just started to create art that was similar to that and try and add those elements in. So I'll put up a couple examples here. I like the contrast. So I started adding contrast to my drawings. Big dark spots that kind of shadow and form around all the other stuff. And I like when the highlights are the details, that they pop through the shadows. I'm doing it this way. I should be doing it this way. Pop through the shadows and you can see, oh yeah, that little thing that's coming out of that shadow. It's amazing. It looks wonderful. That's what I liked. Now you have to evaluate. The reason that I say that when you do this, you're creating the art, you have to make sure that the art that you like to look at is also art that you like to create. Because if you hate to create it, what's the point? You have to make sure. That's why this step is very important. You take the art you like, figure out what it is, put it into some of your own material, see if you like it. If you don't like how you get that result, how to get there, the process, don't do it. Just you go to a different piece of art that you like. I did this with so many things. I like the line and wash, and I like the doodle drawing with the big contrast, and the watercolor with the detail. I just tried so many different things, and I picked what I like to create out of all of it and put it into my art. That's what I did. Now don't worry about, oh, I'm copying someone else's. Just, this is for you to experiment. You're trying to figure out what you're doing, your style that you want to create. So don't worry about, oh, I'm copying this person's art. You need to do that in order to figure out what you like and if you even like creating it. So that's a necessary step. And keep in mind, this isn't stuff you're showing to someone. This is for you. It's going to be in your sketchbook, private sketchbook. You don't have to show anybody if you don't want to. So feel free to make mistakes and try and experiment all different things. Whatever you come in contact with, oh yeah, I want to see that, and see if I can do that, and just recreate something like that. And you can use this stuff later when you figure out, okay, I do like this stuff, but I want to add to it now. I want to add to my style. You just keep going, keep adding elements. Okay, now after you figure out what you like and you're creating it and you're putting it in your art, start to add little elements that are just you, that maybe are not in the art, but you like. Like maybe it's a certain color palette that you love that was not in that art. And you decide, oh, I'm going to do that. Or maybe it's a pen art, like an ink art, and there was no background. And you said, no, you know what? I love watercolor background. So I'm going to do a watercolor background and do the ink art over it. Maybe it's a certain perspective. Like if you draw caricatures. If you draw those things that look like people and you make the proportions the way that just a little quirky that you like. Maybe it's a little cartoony, maybe the heads are a little bigger or the arms are a little longer, whatever you want to do. Just different perspective. Maybe when you draw a landscape, you're kind of looking at it from the ground and you're looking up at it and you draw the landscape that way. Maybe you draw down and you draw top-down landscape stuff. Whatever it is, just make little things, little adjustments that define that it's just you that does this. And don't worry, it'll never be just you that does this. Everything has already been done. You're not going to come up with anything completely original, but I'm going to explain how you could here in just a second. Like one of the examples is I love the muted palette. So most of my drawings and paintings, they have that muted tone to them. They're not bright pastel colors. Maybe you like that. There's a couple of colored pencil artists that are really good, bright pastel colors, and nothing is actually the color of what you'd see. It looks like a realistic drawing, except it's not accurate colors. It's bright pastel colors, but everything else about it is entirely realism. So it's just their spin on it, and you can do something like that. Maybe you focus on a particular subject that most people don't focus on, or you include that element, that little subject, in all of your other paintings, like a little bird off to the side, or I don't know, something, or a certain type of shape or texture that you do in all of your drawings, and just a little bit just to identify it as yours. Now, I know everybody hates Thomas Kinkade. I understand that. Everybody does not like this person. However, if you ever come across a painting by Thomas Kinkade, you know who did it because of the way it is, the way it looks, the exaggerated light. That's just something else, just an element that you exaggerate. That's something you can do. Maybe you exaggerate the clouds in every painting, or maybe you accentuate the shadows in every, whatever it is. You just pick that little element and just change it a little bit. And experiment, have fun. If you're not experimenting, if you're not having... No. And experiment, have fun. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. That's the truth about art. You must be having fun doing it. I'm not saying every second of you creating, you had deadlines you have to hit and you're trying to get them in. But art itself should be fun. You should be having a wonderful time doing this. It should be very meditative for you to just do this and create something and have an end result. It's, oh, I did that. It's nice to do. Okay, the second way is very similar to the other way, but there's a lot less rules and structure to it. Now, it's no secret, if you've ever watched anything I've done, I love to experiment and try new things. Now, step one is always the same. You have to understand what you like before you continue, before you move on. If you only like realism and you start doing doodles, you're not going to be happy creating art. You have to make sure what you enjoy is the same thing as what you're doing. So, I understand you may not like to create certain things, even though you enjoy to look at them, but you need to enjoy whatever it is you're doing. Enjoy to look at it and enjoy to creating it. That's important. So I like experimenting. I like just seeing something and saying, I'm going to do this a little different, but maybe try and come up with the same result. Like I'll just splash ink and paint down on the page and then try and make it look interesting once it's already shaped out there. I just throw, okay, I've got a shape. I've created a shape. I thought the shape was interesting. Maybe I found it somewhere in nature. Maybe it's from a mushroom. Maybe it's from a plant or a tissue, muscle tissue or something like that. And then, okay, I just find this shape and then I try and add the detail to make it look interesting to me. So I experiment with it, and eventually I do this enough and I figure out, okay, well, I like to do this like this, and then I develop my own style through that. I think some things that I do that I haven't really seen many other places. And it's not because it's so unique to me that no one else has ever done it. It's that all the little details and things that I've changed and experimented with just all come together. So it's not just one thing. It's no one's really going to have the same pattern unless you're recreating the exact same style of someone else. But if you're taking multiple different styles, you're putting them all together, you're adding your own elements and changing different things, very few people are all going to have the same combination of things. Now, there are other artists that will be doing that you can't avoid that. It's art. Most people see it and copy it and say, okay, I like that style, and they just do that style. So you're not going to avoid that, but it's still going to be a little taste of you, and you'll be known for that thing. If that's really something you need and you didn't take your pill that day, you'll have something that's only unique to you that other people are looking at. So just quickly, how I did this was I liked watching the doodle ink drawings. I started out doing like wildlife and landscapes. I love doing that. I still like doing that, but I wanted to do something different. I didn't want it to just be, okay, it's a bird. I've done the bird 100 times, or I've done the landscape 100 times. I enjoy it, but I would like to do something more, something different that just kind of gets more creativity out, more experimentation. And so what I did was I said, okay, I'm going to look at this doodle drawing stuff. And I really started to like, oh, I like that contrast. Let me take some of that information. And I really love line and wash. I've always loved watercolor with ink. It's one of my favorite things to do. So let me see if I can add some of the doodle stuff in with the watercolor and ink, bigger contrast. Let me see if I can do that kind of stuff. And I just kept adding and taking away things. I try to mix mediums and say, okay, wait, what if I did this differently? What if I put acrylic in the background, very washed out on paper so it sticks, and then add watercolor on top of it? Can I do that? Maybe add a little colored pencil on top of that. Can I do that? And it was all experimentation. That's what I love about art. I get excited when I experiment and something actually works. And it's, oh, I like how that turned out. It's a wonderful feeling. Now I know that these two things sounded very similar, but one is very conscious. I'm looking at this one thing, I'm adding this one thing, changing this one thing. The other, or making a decision to use a certain palette color. The other is just complete experimentation, no rules. I'm throwing everything on the page that I absolutely can, and whatever comes out, comes out. And I do that enough times until something develops, and then that is a style that I enjoy, which I've done with a few things. So I've started doing, and I'm going to throw some examples up here, the ink drawings with the contrast. You already saw that stuff there. I might not put it up again. But then I started like doing the muscle fiber thing. I don't know why I like that, but I like the little muscle fiber thing that you do with the line and wash and add a little bit of detail. I like doing the shadow and contrast in the watercolor and doing another little extra color inside the other color and creating some contrast that way, and then going over it with some ink and pointing it out and pulling it out. I started saying, well, wait a minute now, I really like doing the highlight thing. I like the white gel pen on the darker paper. So what if I paint some watercolor in the background, and then I start painting dark shadows, and then I put the detail in with the highlights, with the white pen or white gouache or something like that. And I started doing those types of things, and I love doing those types of things. I like the way that that looks. It's when I get done with it, I think it could be something from another planet, maybe some space debris or something, and I enjoy that. Now, I really like pencil drawing, but I like the pencil drawing because of the gradation of the gray that you can get. You can just start very light, get darker and darker and darker, develop different contrast areas, but it never really gets too dark for me. So I started adding pen into the ink, into the pencil. And so when they did that, it's, oh, there's the contrast. It's adding to that, making it a lot darker than I could just with the pencil. And it still looks a little bit clean. So then I started using the watercolor pencil with the ink and doing that and shading it that way. It was fun. It was something I experimented with, and I do these a lot. I do this kind of stuff where I just use this kind of medium together. I love it. Now, a lot of people paint gouache on black paper, but not a lot of people do this. So I decided that I wanted to add the white gouache onto the paper and then go over it with concentrated watercolor, like a thick layer, not watered down at all, just heavy watercolor, and let it blend out into the white gouache and create these shapes and textures and shadows. And I love doing that. That's something that was a complete experimentation. I've never seen that before. I'm sure someone else has done it, but I've never seen it before. But I wanted to do that. So I started doing more of that. So now that's a style that I do. Now here's a style. I'm not claiming any originality here at all. I know a lot of people do this. But I started doing the watercolor where you put the masking fluid on in different shapes. And then you do the wash over the whole thing. And then you take the masking fluid off. And then you put the details in the shapes. I love doing that. I started doing that and I just found, okay, yeah, it gives me a lot of ideas for shapes that maybe I wouldn't have thought of because I just splash the masking fluid on the paper, move it around. I don't really make conscious decisions on that. And then once I pull the masking fluid off after the wash, now I have shapes there and then I try and make something interesting out of it. It's very fun. It's therapeutic. You just start going at it and just add detail and just develop it a little bit more. And that's a style that I love to do. So I want to just, in the conclusion of this, I just want to talk to you about, people say, oh, just do enough art and your style, you'll come out in your art. I think you have to consciously decide to create something. I think you have to develop something in your way intentionally, even if it's through experimentation and you're just throwing stuff on a page. You do that a couple times, you start to pick up and, okay, I like this, I'm pulling this into the next one, and then I'll do some more experimentation. But you're developing your style consciously. You're not just doing the same landscape painting over and over and hoping that a style develops for you. That doesn't happen. You have to consciously do it. And I think if you take these methods and you use them, you'll come up with something that you enjoy, that you like, that you love to do, and that you like to look at as well. If you don't like to look at your own art, it's not going to be worth it for you. You need to be happy and proud of what you've just done and say, look, I created that, never existed before, and I like the way this looks. I love it. It's an original piece that I did. No one else did it. It just helps. And since there's so many different paths, like I was saying earlier, it's like you have just snow-covered ground. And even though you have 10 people that go to work at the same place and they walk through the same snow, they make different paths because they take different routes to get there. So everyone's pattern is going to be different a little bit. You're going to go the same roads, but it's still going to be different. It's going to be recognizable. That's your footprint right there, not someone else's. So I really hope this helped you. Thumb up the video if you're going to go ahead and try something that I just mentioned and suggested. Maybe it'll help you, maybe it won't. You can come back here and yell at me if everything is wrong, it's terrible, you hate it. I still want you to thumb up the video though. Alright, that's about it for me. I'm gonna go. I'll see you in the next one.